The film begins with a recollection of events from the past. A young girl named Madeline Swan, played by Colleen Defaud, is caring for her sick mother, Mathilde Bourbin, when a masked man, portrayed by Rami Malek, approaches their home. Madeline catches a glimpse of the man at the window and immediately hides. When the masked man enters the house, he introduces himself as Lucifer Safin and states that he is searching for Mr. White, as he had murdered Safin's family. Upon realizing that Madeline's mother does not have the information he seeks, Safin kills her. Madeline, in fear for her life, shoots Safin and drags his body outside, but to her surprise, he is still alive. Madeline tries to escape by running across a frozen lake, but she eventually falls through the ice. Despite his mission, Safin cannot bring himself to let the young girl die and saves her by shooting the ice and pulling her out. In the current timeline, Madeline, now portrayed by Léa Seydoux, is residing in Matera with James Bond, Daniel Craig, and they are in a romantic relationship. Despite their happiness, Madeline realizes that Bond still has unresolved feelings for Vesper Lynd, who is buried near their home. She encourages Bond to let go of his thoughts about Vesper and do the same for her memory of Safin by composing "masked man" in French and then burning the piece of paper. The following morning, Bond visits Vesper's gravesite and plans to forgive her. He has a piece of paper with the words, "Forgive me," ready to be burned. However, before he leaves, Bond notices a Spectre calling card, and the tomb suddenly explodes. Bond quickly gets up and runs away, only to be pursued by assassins led by Primo Cyclops, Dali Bensala, who has a cybernetic eye. Bond accuses Madeline of setting him up and takes her with him on a high-speed chase across Matera in an Aston Martin, avoiding the assassins' vans and gunfire. The villains corner Bond and Madeline in the middle of a plaza, and Bond sits there as the assassins shoot at the car. When he realizes Madeline is telling the truth, he activates the car's machine gun and kills most of the assassins, except for Primo. After the escape, Bond takes Madeline to a train station, but he parts ways with her as his trust in her has been destroyed. She tries to catch him as the train departs, but he is already gone. A group of assassins breaks into an MI6 laboratory 5 years after an event. They are operating under the orders of Safin and make contact with the head scientist, Valdo Obruchev. The assassins take Obruchev and another scientist hostage, killing the rest of the team in order to acquire Heracles, a potent bioweapon that can infect individuals through physical contact. After obtaining the weapon, the assassins eliminate the other scientist and take Obruchev with them. MI6 learns of the situation, with Moneypenny speaking to M about it, but he refuses to reveal information about Heracles and demands to know the whereabouts of 007. James Bond has left his life as an MI6 agent and is now residing in Jamaica. He meets Felix Leiter and Logan Ash at a club where Felix informs him about a scientist being captured and a lab being broken into. Despite Felix's attempts, Bond is not interested in getting involved and even expresses his distrust of Ash. On his way home, Bond's car malfunctions, and he is rescued by Nomi, who reveals herself to be a secret agent with MI6 and the new 007. She warns Bond to stay out of her way as she has set her sights on the captured scientist. M, Rory Kinnear, and Bill Tanner in discussion with Q, Ben Whishaw, regarding the retrieval of files that have been taken from the laboratory. Bond then calls M to inquire about his involvement with Obruchev and Spectre. M promptly hangs up and informs Tanner that he wants to communicate with Blofeld, Christoph Waltz, who is currently imprisoned in Belmarsh. Blofeld is depicted as talking to himself while in his cell. Felix tasks Bond with traveling to Cuba to meet a CIA agent named Paloma. Together, they attend a Spectre gathering where Blofeld is using a robotic eye to spy on the event. Meanwhile, Obruchev is being forced to set up the Heracles device, but he is caught switching a vial. Bond and Paloma become aware of Blofeld's sinister plans, and the entire party turns on Bond. The Heracles poison is intended to kill Bond, but ends up killing the Spectre agents instead. Bond and Paloma fend off against attackers, including Primo, and Nomi arrives to capture Obruchev. After defeating several henchmen, Paloma spots Obruchev trying to escape and crashes her car into the structure he is climbing down, causing it to collapse onto her car. Bond takes Obruchev and parts ways with Paloma, who gifts him a cigar for Felix. Bond takes Obruchev away on a dilapidated plane. Bond escorts Obruchev to Felix's boat to have a meeting with him and Ash. During the questioning about Heracles and why it didn't harm Bond, Ash becomes anxious and tells Obruchev to stop talking. Obruchev reveals that Spectre was the main target for the poison, so he altered the DNA sample to kill them instead of Bond, and that M was involved in creating Heracles. Bond realizes that Ash is a double agent working with Obruchev when he asks how Blofeld knew his location. In the midst of a struggle, Ash shoots Felix and flees with Obruchev, causing a hole in the ship that leads to its sinking. Despite Bond's attempts to save Felix, they both know his gunshot wound is too severe, and Felix accepts his fate. Bond, with sorrow, leaves his friend behind before successfully freeing himself and escaping. Bond goes back to MI6 to talk to M. He wants to go to Belmarsh to talk to Blofeld, but M denies his request and becomes angry with Bond. M orders Nomi to scan everything in Blofeld's cell, including Blofeld himself. As Bond is leaving, Moneypenny offers to assist him. That evening, Bond and Moneypenny go to Q's house where he is having dinner with his partner. They ask Q to examine the files they obtained, and upon inspection, they find files on the Spectre targets, with only Blofeld still remaining. There are also thousands of other files on other individuals containing their DNA samples globally. Bond instructs Q to get him access to Blofeld in Belmarsh, but Q informs them that only one person has the authority to grant that access. The movie then switches to a scene where Madeline is heading to her work as a psychiatrist. Upon reaching her office, she finds Safin there waiting for her. At first, she fails to recognize him until he shows her his broken mask. The sight of the mask makes Madeline feel afraid, but Safin then explains that he needs her for something. Bond is eventually brought back into the MI6 fold and assigned as a 00 agent once again. During a meeting with the rest of the team, they discuss a Spectre operative's funeral, where 5 of the operative's relatives who came into contact with him have died from the Heracles poison. M explains that Heracles was originally intended to be a controlled substance that would only affect specific targets, but it has since been weaponized using nanobots to attack wider groups of people. M gives Bond the green light to meet with Blofeld and gather any information he can. Bond visits Belmarsh and encounters Madeline again. When he attempts to shake her hand, she declines. Upon the arrival of Blofeld, Madeline becomes uneasy and tries to depart, but Bond holds onto her wrist. However, she manages to break free and leaves. Bond is then left alone with Blofeld, who provokes Bond by claiming to have orchestrated the attack at Vesper's tomb to frame Madeline. Bond becomes so irritated by Blofeld's taunts that he lunges at him. Just as Tanner intervenes to prevent Bond from harming Blofeld, they discover that Blofeld has been fatally poisoned from Bond's touch. Bond discovers that he has contracted the Heracles virus after touching Madeline and cannot cure it. Madeline has disappeared from her apartment and is nowhere to be found. Bond sets out on his own to find her and eventually locates her at her childhood home. To his surprise, he discovers that she has a daughter, Matilda, though she denies that Bond is the father. After putting Matilda to bed, Madeline reveals to Bond the identity of Safin and his background. Madeline's father was instructed by Blofeld to kill Safin's entire family, leaving him as the only survivor with facial disfigurements. Madeline also mentions an island that belonged to Safin's family, which is currently his base of operations. Bond provides Q with information on locating Safin, and Q informs MI6 that the island is located between Japan and Russia. Nomi is searching for Ash, but Bond realizes that he and other minions of Safin are close by, so he takes Madeline and Matilda to a safer location. During the pursuit, Safin's hired killers are after the trio. Bond successfully eliminates 2 of them by running them off the road. However, their own van also gets knocked off the road. Bond engages in a shootout with the remaining assassins and sets up ambushes for a few more until Ash appears, attempting to eliminate Bond himself. Bond manages to turn the tables on Ash by flipping his van, causing it to crash. As Ash crawls out of the wreckage, he begs for Bond's assistance. In response to Felix's death, Bond chooses to avenge him by pushing Ash's van down, crushing him. He then finds out that Madeline and Matilda have been taken to an island. Bond is back with MI6 and takes over the 007 title from Nomi. Together, they travel to an island to stop the villain Safin and rescue Madeline and Matilda. At the island, Safin has taken the two to his garden, where dangerous plants and nanobots are grown for the creation of the Heracles poison. Bond and Nomi infiltrate the facility and engage in a fight with the armed guards. They manage to capture Obruchev and plan to destroy the place, but they do not have enough explosives to complete the mission. Despite the threats, Nomi forces Obruchev into a pool filled with nanobots, leading to his gruesome death. The workers at the facility quickly flee when they witness the power of the nanobots. Madeline manages to escape from Primo's captivity by splashing hot tea on his face. Bond then locates Safin with Matilda as his captive. When Safin threatens their lives, Bond kneels and pleads with him to spare them in exchange for his compliance, but he then pulls out a hidden pistol and eliminates Safin's guards. Safin manages to escape through a hatch with Matilda. However, the little girl bites him, causing him to let her go, and she hides until Madeline finds her. Bond comes across them and helps them escape. Primo tries to attack Bond, but he uses a gadget watch from Q to damage Primo's cybernetic eye and cause it to explode, resulting in Primo's death. Bond opens the hatch doors to allow the Royal Navy to launch missiles and destroy the facility, but Safin intervenes, closing the doors. Bond fights Safin, breaking his arm and killing him before opening the doors again. However, he realizes that he cannot leave the island without endangering Madeline and Matilda. Bond reaches out to Q, who puts Madeline on the line for him to share their final moment together and confirm their love for each other. It is revealed that Matilda is Bond's daughter. Bond stands as the missiles arrive, destroying the facility and himself. The rest of the team realizes what has happened. At the MI6 headquarters, a group consisting of M, Tanner, Q, Moneypenny, and Nomi gather to raise a glass in honor of Bond's memory. Madeline driving Matilda to Matera with the intention of starting a new chapter in their lives. During the journey, Madeline decides to reveal to Matilda a story about her father, who was known as Bond, James Bond.